Hi, my name is Adam Masrick, and this is a presentation about the Battle of Isandlwana. To start, we must understand some very important background information. First, it is important to note the location of this battle. Zululand was a region in southern Africa that made up the northeastern border of the British territory Natal, pictured to the right. At this time, the British were attempting to gain territory in South Africa, which explains the motives that led to this battle. We'll go more into these motives on the next slide. It is also good to note that on the edge of this picture, you can see where Isandlwana is, and it's very close to the border of Zululand and Natal. Another important piece of information is the fact that the king of Zululand, King Katashweo, was seen as a reasonable and thoughtful king who regarded the British as friends. We'll also talk more about King Katashweo in a later slide. Finally, it is also important to note that the people of Zululand were much less advanced than the British, especially in terms of warfare, and the British knew this. One more important thing to understand is why the British were in South Africa at this time. The British had begun to imperialize South Africa because of the diamond rush that they had found when they first arrived. However, the British quickly realized there was much more to South Africa than simply diamonds. They also realized that it was very easy to take over more territory in South Africa, so that's exactly what they did. South Africa was seen as a great location for British ports to increase and control more trade. One of the biggest reasons the British easily invaded South Africa was the trades they enacted with the rulers of the South African states. The Europeans brought new technology and the promise of greater economy in exchange for slaves. Unfortunately, this allowed for a boom in the Atlantic slave trade, which couldn't have taken place without the help of the Africans themselves. Thus, the British imperialization of South Africa allowed for a boom in the South African economy. However, the British also waged many battles against the native people in South Africa, like the Battle of Isandlwana, and allowed for the boom of the Atlantic slave trade. The call to attack the Zululand was made by a British officer named Sir Henry Bartle Frere. Frere was one of the British chief commissioners who aided in the economic development of Sindh, which is in part of what is today Pakistan. His work and successfulness in Sindh earned him knighthood. Frere was serving as the High Commissioner of South Africa of Southern Africa for the British Army. Excuse me. Frere was given this job of High Commissioner in South Africa because the British hoped that he would have similar economic success as he did previously mentioned in Sindh. However, in December of 1878, he made demands for King Katashweo that he knew the king would be unable to meet. These demands included the dismantling of the entire Zulu military system within 30 days. Because the king didn't meet the demands of Frere, he gave the order to invade Zululand. Frere made the demands impossible to satisfy because he needed a reason to invade Zululand. As we will see in the next slide, Katashweo wasn't someone the British wanted to mess with before. King Katashweo of Zululand was one of the most respected kings in all of South Africa. Katashweo had a well-trained army of 40,000 warriors that the British had always seen as a threat, despite their lack of resources and skills that the British had. However, because of the many victories that Katashweo had in the past, Zululand was respected as sovereign by the British until Frere's demands were sent. One of the many reasons Katashweo had become so respected in South Africa was because of the mutual respect he showed for the British. The region shown earlier, Natal, had the possibility of being attacked by the Zulu at any time, but Katashweo never did because of the respect he had for the British. The invasion ordered by Frere was led by Frederick Thesiger, the second Baron Chelmsford. Lord Chelmsford was most known for his service in the Crimean War and the Indian Rebellion. Chelmsford decided to bring only a mere 7,800 troops on this invasion because he expected the tactics and machinery of the British army to easily defeat the lesser Zulu warriors. Chelmsford and his troops marched into Zululand and made camp at the hill of Isandlwana, which would end up being the location of this bloody battle. Chelmsford, being very confident in his men, didn't make camp with the normal precautions and quickly sent scouts to try and locate the main Zulu army. Some of these precautions that they skipped, including creating the defensive areas at camp in case they were to have to fight a battle at camp, which, as we will see in the next few slides, becomes a fatal mistake. His scouts found some Zulu warriors, and Chelmsford took troops with him, assuming he would be led straight to the main Zulu army. Chelmsford left only 1,300 troops at Isandlwana. However, the warriors that Chelmsford was chasing were decoys sent by Katashweo's army. The 20,000 Zulu warriors were actually hidden just outside the British camp in the valley of Ingwebeni, waiting to attack. On January 22nd, 1879, British troops that were still at Isandlwana found the 20,000 Zulu warriors that were hidden, and the Battle of Isandlwana began. The Zulu were held off by the British at first because of their superior technology, but their lack of troops quickly became a problem. The British fell back to their camp in order to get more ammunition, but were chased by the Zulu and found themselves cornered. The Zulu, because of how much training they had from King Katashweo, fell into their attack formation independently. As the British held their camp, they appeared to be winning. However, they were also running out of ammunition, which meant they had to fall back even more. At this point, the precautions that I mentioned earlier would have come in very helpful because as they fell back, the Zulu capitalized on their maneuver and broke through the line. This passing through the line led to even more problems for the British, and they began to be overpowered by the Zulu. The British continued to fight until the end, but the Battle of Isandlwana became a slaughter. The Zulu were killing British left and right, and in the end, only 371 of the 1,300 British troops survived. The battle only lasted 2 days. After their incredible victory at Isandlwana, some 4,000 Zulu warriors went against orders from King Katashweo himself to stand down and followed the British to Rorke's Drift. At Rorke's Drift, 139 British troops battled the 4,000 Zulu warriors. King Katashweo didn't order his troops to invade the British territory, Natal, because he still had hoped to use negotiations to reach a peaceful settlement after the blood of Isandlwana. However, these warriors that followed the fleeing British to Rorke's Drift would be fended off by the minimal soldiers that were already at Rorke's Drift. This victory for the British was not only a morale boost for them, but also showed that the lack of preparedness at Isandlwana might have been the biggest factor that led to their defeat. If Chelmsford and his men had set up defense areas at their camp at Isandlwana, it might have stopped the Zulu from breaking through their line and could have led to a British win at Isandlwana, as opposed to the embarrassment that they went through. As the news of the humiliating defeat reached the homeland of Britain, the British people were absolutely outraged. They called for blood and demanded that the government attack Zululand to show the Zulu who really was boss. The British government, seeing the demands of the people, sent in a much larger force from Natal into Zululand. The British army was also much more cautious about how they invaded Zululand because of their prior defeat. In a short 6 months, the British won nearly 5 battles across Zululand, and King Katashweo had no choice but to surrender to British rule. During these battles, lots of lives were lost, and it can't be forgotten that King Katashweo himself had always hoped for peaceful negotiation as opposed to the war that they went through. The British this time successfully defeated and captured Zululand, which became a protectorate until 1897, when it was absorbed by Natal. In the end, the Battle of Isandlwana was and still is the worst defeat the British have ever suffered to a native force. Sir Henry Bartle Frere was condemned by society for his actions and the humiliating defeat, and never commanded a British army again. King Katashweo, on the other hand, had been exiled after the battle at Rorke's Drift and the other battles that happened across Zululand as the British government sent in more troops to take over Zululand, but was returned because people applauded the courage and skills he displayed against the British. Zululand also ends up falling to the British rule as a result of the previously described British embarrassment. Thus, the Battle of Isandlwana can be seen The Battle of Isandlwana can be seen as a showing of the power of native forces of South Africa, but also served as a wake-up call for the British Army. Due to the fact that Zululand loses its sovereignty as a result of their victory at Isandlwana, the Zulu people most likely wish there could have been a different scenario in which they remained a sovereign state, yet they must take pride in how their people fought. Here are my sources, and thank you for listening.